Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Okay, so first of all, I was impressed because you dealt with so many issues of today. I mean, talking about dating online and, meeting new people, new men or women or whatever. It's something that it's so part of our culture right now.
Sure.
But everybody's talking in some different way. Instead, you just really kind of plunge in, you just went for it. So I think it's very courageous and finally it was great to read.
Thank you.
Yeah. When did it start? When you really had the first idea, they said, I'm going to write a book and the book is going to be about this. When was that? You had a lightning moment?
Well, yeah. I mean, I split up from my long-term partner sort of about 10 years ago, and started to do some dating. And it was, and I think I was really quite struck by what a bizarre world it is, online dating. And it was this kind of crazy world of kind of meeting new people and realizing how mad they are. That's kind of what kind of got me started. But then I did a course at Faber, the Faber Academy, about 4 years ago. It was just a complete fluke that they had a place. So I leapt at the chance to take that, and that just gave me the impetus to kind of write. And then about 6 months after that, I attended a Guardian masterclass where Graham Bartlett was. So he's here with us this morning as well. So that was a real turning point, Graham, because I hadn't really thought about that I would write a crime novel, partly because I didn't know anything about kind of police matters at all. So
you did. No, you knew more than you give yourself credit for. I had to tweak a little bit, but you were there or thereabouts.
But I think
later, can't we? But
I think it was attending the masterclass because there was Neil White, who helps writers with all the kind of law kind of matters. Was he a barrister? Was he
He's a solicitor, prosecuting solicitor.
Prosecuting solicitor, sure. And also Erin Kelly, who's obviously a very. In fact, I've got this much left of He Said, She Said, which is absolutely a fantastic book. So and also Kate Bentelow.
Yeah, Kate
as well, she was absolutely fantastic.
So I wanted to ask you a question because that's sort of I think it's pretty interesting to find out. So how much is autobiographical? And how much?
Well, gosh, what can I say? I mean, quite a bit. I mean, it's all about I think also by the time you get to middle age, you have an awful lot of kind of life experiences. So I definitely did draw on a lot of that. But no, I haven't attempted to murder anybody or been arrested for the attempted murder.
That was my main point.
Yeah. One thing that I wanted to explore was about female friendships as well, and how they change over time. We change so much. Our outlook, our kind of, domestic situation, our careers, all of that kind of thing changes. And it makes you a different person. And also, I mean, one of the things that I was kind of interested in was how when you have children and you meet so many other parents and especially mums. It's mums at the school gates that you have conversations with, isn't it? And how that can actually be quite competitive.
Yeah.
So that was one of the things that I really wanted to explore as well, really, and how how you have these kind of little battles with in a very nice way with kind of other mothers. So and so is learning violin, or so and so is kind of doing this. It's kind of, you don't realize you're doing it, but you kind of
Yeah.
So there was a bit of, and obviously one of the things that a few people have said is there are so many people in this book, but I think I wanted to just reflect what it's like to be in a city where you do make lots of friends, you know, and what were you going to say?
Yes, about this, about having lots of people in your book. That does make sense because that's real life. And sometimes I notice in in books or on series that sometimes there are very few people, and I think, but in real life, surely, you know, you interact with a lot more people than just that little handful. So I think your book is then, in that sense, very realistic.
I guess, well, when I first showed it to my structural editor, she, in fact, you know, there's still quite a lot of characters, but it was actually trimmed down quite a lot. So, for instance, the character of Agnes is actually now three people kind of rolled into one. But actually, Susan said to me, actually, when you think about what their key characteristics are, if you're able to kind of build those into one person, it'll actually make the story much cleaner.
Yeah. So it gets polarized, I guess, you know. I mean, you concentrate all kind of qualities or faults into one person, and so this person kind of, you know, got a build up. Yeah. So that's very important. Sure. It's important for cinema, it's important for books, everything. Sure. But yeah, I was really touched by when you know, so you talked a lot about single parenthood and how difficult it is, because this is another main concern. It's not only dating online, but also the fact that you were a single mother. Yeah. So how did you, you know, kind of made it all go into one, just turn
well, I mean, absolutely. I mean, that's something, certainly an area that I did draw on, that the idea, you know, of, well, you know, making up your, you know, making a decision whether you know, if you find yourself single, that you're going to stay single, and accept that, or think about meeting somebody else. And it's so difficult to meet when you're in your 40s. So difficult to meet somebody else. You know, most of my clients that are male are, you know, either married or gay. You know, which is, you know, just one of those things. So, and I remember one mum at one of my son's old schools saying to me one morning, she, you know, we had a coffee, and she said, "But do you not find that the other mums at school, you know, are a little bit kind of suspicious of you, that you might be trying to pinch their husbands?" And I was like, "No, because I'm not." You know, it was kind of a really bizarre thing for her to, I mean, you know, whether or not that's what she was doing, and that's why they were suspicious. But I found that kind of quite odd. And I mean, God, that was so, you know, I'd rather pay thousands of pounds in, you know, for dating subscriptions than to go down that road. So it was, yeah. So, but it's, you know, it's very, you know, for the people who have done online dating, it's really time consuming as well. So you have to plan ahead. So you know, if somebody kind of, you know, says, "Oh, how about meeting tomorrow for a coffee or a, you know, a drink at, you know, in the evening?" You think, "Oh my God, you know, babysitter." Yeah. So that was my life for a good couple of years, kind of like, "Oh my God, okay." And then you know, your babysitter cancels. So it's like, you know,
yeah.
So there was quite a lot of that, just being very, you know, kind of planning. But I'm very glad that's way behind me now. So, but I think also what was interesting was that I had some single friends who didn't have children, and they were very judgmental, I think is probably the best word, about the fact that whether I should be doing dating at all, and whether I shouldn't be devoting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to my son, which, you know, I guess is a valid point. But I think what all parents do is that, you know, they try and, you know, kind of make the most for their children, you know, that make everything, you know, as good as it possibly can be. And I suppose part of the reason I decided I wanted to meet somebody else was because I think it would have been good to have a father figure. So but that doesn't, as you know, the people
But I
who read the
think, you
book,
know,
that doesn't always
No,
that
no.
doesn't always work out either.
No, I think
so.
that it's a question of, as you were saying, it's a question of competition and also jealousy a lot, and a form of control, So either women don't want you to get near anybody else, in the sense their husband, their fiance, whatever, or they don't want you to have anyone because say, oh, well, you're single, you got a son, that's your life, which is it's a form of control. Why in the world you would just stay single if you feel like you got your whole life in front of you? So it's very complicated because it gets into their intimate kind of feelings and about people imposing you their kind of control, their kind of ideas.
Well, it's imposing their own views, but doing it kind of almost as advice, really, which is kind of a bit, it's kind of a bit strange, really, I think.
Okay, going back to dating online, it's true that like 10 years ago or even 20 years ago, it wasn't definitely fashionable. I mean, it was something that you would do, in kind of hide and seek, way, like not telling.
I was very resistant to the whole idea, idea of it, really. But I also, when you're a single parent, you don't have the opportunity to just go and kind of hang out in a cafe or or whatever. But actually, we have a bit of an expert in our midst, because Jessica, you've actually written as a sort of dating expert, haven't you, for as part of your job?
Oh, I wrote for experts in dating. I'm not a dating expert. I am a dating failure. I did ghostwriting for experts who would tell people how to date. But I'm curious about. Oh, go ahead, Catherine.
No, I was going to say, but so why do you think they needed a ghostwriter to do? Were they
just the way that we outsource so many different things? So, when you get bigger and bigger, you have more and more responsibilities. And so that was one of the things that they wanted to outsource. I mean, it would be hard for me, and maybe for you too, as a writer, to have somebody else writing as yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Really difficult. But I want to know about the 40,000 words that you cut.
Well, actually, Jessica, and I guess Graham as well, because Graham was part of the helped me write it. But Jessica was certainly one of the first people who read it from kind of start to finish. And you were a little bit kind of not horrified, surprised at how many sex scenes there were. At one point,
I was going to get to that, but go ahead.
But actually, Jessica, you made me really laugh in one of your messages, because you said, "Oh my God, Catherine, I've gone for 5 pages and there hasn't been any sex." So, but the 40,000 words went when I, after the structural editor had looked at it. Because there was even more of that kind of day, that crazy time when she goes, "Oh my God, I need to, Mal has dumped me. I need to find somebody else." Mm-hmm. So there was more dating, and actually, in retrospect, it's much better. It was much better that, and there was one guy who, she went, had a date with, and then he went to, he came over for dinner, and so it was all very, and actually very much how it is. You do lots of kind of coming and going, and but actually not very interesting for the reader necessarily either. So,
but it would have made us feel better. It would have made me feel better to read all about the failures.
Well, I'm very happy to send that to you, but I'm not sure if it's. But oh gosh, but actually in what the editor said to me also is how it's not, if it's not pertinent to the story, then you can get rid of it as well. So that, and so if, like Paul is kind of almost like a kind of throwaway character, really, because he's actually not important to the story. And treat it, and I think in the main scene, which is the one where she goes to a members club with him, is kind of seen in retrospect, which kind of even more so kind of kind of accentuates the fact that he's not pertinent to the story at all. So yeah.
No, but I was really, when I was reading the book, first of all, sorry to say, yeah, it's a thriller, but for 300 pages, we're only talking about sex and relationship. So I mean, I think it's more about that than anything else. But then, of course, there's a a good ending, a nice, really tight ending. But then, I was really surprised about all this graphic sex scene because, I said, I mean, online dating can be anything, which, also includes that. But basically, you really concentrate on that. So,
well, I don't know. I think there's a bit of an odd, I think women our age have quite an odd relationship with sex, really. I think we are, not everybody, obviously, but I think there's, almost like a kind of Victorian attitude that, women shouldn't enjoy sex. And I think, I find that kind of quite odd, really. So I wanted to have I wanted with Alex to have a character that, that did have a sexual appetite and didn't want to, just decide she was retiring that part of her life, really. So that, that was quite important to me, really. But also, it's not, I didn't want it to be kind of hearts and flowers and
it's a passionate book. I really appreciate that.
One of the things about dating, I mean, it's it's fantastic to meet people in as we used to 25 years ago, meet somebody at a party or somebody you work with, say. But if that doesn't happen, I mean, and what's nice about that is that you get to know somebody over time. And grow to kind of fall in love with them as a person, but that doesn't happen with dating at all. It's kind of all about what they look like and what they say, and you might fall in love with somebody that you dismiss because their profile doesn't quite cut the mustard.
And then when you see them in real flesh, you say, well, this is a nice person. I mean, it's actually a real person, as opposed to just a catalogue face.
So it definitely has its disadvantages as well. So yeah.
And instead, tell us a bit about the thriller side. The murder, deciding, because that's also, I think, it's very difficult for somebody that is not, you're not part of, that kind of environment.
Sure. One of just a general thing that I wanted to talk about with with having a crime aspect is the idea of somebody who is thrown into a situation that they don't understand at all. I mean, and that's something that we talked about, Graham, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it happens to so many people that they are literally plunged into this world that is very threatening and very confusing for them, and they have absolutely no concept of what's going to happen in the next hour, day, week, month, year, for the rest of their life, and they have no control over it either, or very little control over it. So it's really important to try and work with Alex's character to try and get her to, I mean, I've never been in that situation, I've been on the other side of it, but try and work with Catherine to really get her to experience some of that, and to meet some of the people, because there'll be some people that will be quite benevolent towards her, and there'll be some people that have made their mind up, and it's about how that works in Alex's mind and plays into her anxiety and her well-reasoned paranoia.
I remember one of the points that you made. I asked you how an innocent person, how they would act, how they would act or react, and you said that they wouldn't. Often they just don't shut up about it. They just keep saying they're innocent.
Yeah. To be honest, we can go into this in more detail later, but to be honest, it's not always the best advice, or not always the best decision for an innocent person to literally just kind of just keep saying, look, it wasn't me, because they haven't heard everything that the police have got, and it's a long game, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint, and but they do. That's exactly what they do. They will come in and they will literally, you can spot them a mile off. If someone comes in and is literally, hands open, it wasn't me, you kind of listen to that,
And you get a sixth sense, I guess, do you?
Yeah, no, you do, and you start with experience. You start to differentiate between the people that are playing that game and those that are genuine. Because you obviously don't accept it on face value, but you kind of probe it in different ways, and you soon find out that the ones that probably are innocent versus those that have just watched some telly or been on a read one of Catherine's books.
Well, we've got quite a few writers here today as well, haven't we? Jennifer, you haven't written a thriller, have you? But how did you go about writing? What was your story?
Well, my story was based on, similar in the sense that it's about, strong women and women, embracing part of who they are, but very different genre. So historical fiction, Italy, during the rise of fascism and World War II, and women surviving that really on their own, and, what it took to do that, coming from my grandmother's stories, and trying to kind of recapture women's stories from history, which I think really needs to be done. I think, more perspective for women, as you were saying about the sexuality element, these things need to be more on the forefront of conversations. And I think there's a lot to do. There's a lot of topics that we haven't even touched upon when it comes to women's point of view, because for so long we've seen men's point of view depicted through everything. Because of just, whether it's because they're in leadership, they're the decision makers when it comes to films, they're the directors, the producers, they're in the senior, roles. And we need to get more of a female perspective all the way back through history. So yeah, I love that about your book. And I think, and kudos to you for bringing that forward. So it's great.
Jessica, well, you came over to London in 2004, didn't you? What was the dating scene in London like in 2004?
So that was before you were online dating, right? Because Dylan was born, around that time.
2006, yeah.
Yeah, and it was because I had moved there, single, and I was 29 years old. So I thought, oh, this is like a whole new candy store. But at the same time, I didn't need it as much because it was a new experience. So I kind of let the dating thing go, and then I started. And it's all the same. I don't think it matters wherever you live. Everybody still feels the same way and has the same fears. And, we misread each other. And, it was so much of what you wrote in the book about getting your hopes up, and you get so excited, and because you're a grown up, you're not a little girl, that this might not work out, but you let yourself get excited. And then with that building excitement comes the dreadful crashing down when it doesn't work out. And I think that you painted that very well when she's looking out the window and she starts crying and she thinks, there goes another one, and I'm never going to feel this ever again.
There are men who are complete players on there as well. And did you feel like you were playing a game, Jessica?
Yeah, well, it's this thing about feeling like you only need one. So then only one makes it sound so easy, but then it becomes harder because where is this one? And it's like lightning striking. And so, you see this one profile and you get excited, and then that doesn't work out. And then, so I think when you first go on it, there's this surge of excitement, like, oh, all this possibility. Oh my goodness. And then it's just like a boot camp of, disappointment because the longer you get into it, just that excitement just vanishes, and it's replaced by, that's it, I have to get off this and I'm going to take a break. And then you take a break, and then you hear one friend who had a success story, and she's so happy. And then you think, okay, I'm going to try again.
Thank you for making the time to join, everybody.
Thank you. And especially thank you, Catherine, for this wonderful book.
Thank you
Yeah.
for coming
Good
on.
job. Congratulations.